Hi everyone, my name's Hayley Turner-McIntyre. I'm the Welfare Officer at the Students' Union. So today we're doing a Q&A session with Graham Galbraith, who's the Vice-Chancellor of the University, and Chris Chang, who's the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Global Engagement at the University also. So thank you both for coming. Would you both be able to talk a little bit about your role and what you've done in the past few months relating to COVID and preparing for the next academic year? If we start with Graham.
Yeah, well, Hayley, the honest truth here is that we're all doing things that are not in our job description, but that's true of everybody, isn't it, really? I think it's all, hands to the pump, as it were. And I'm just really impressed from my point of view of trying to coordinate this complex tasks, from shutting down the university to now bringing the university back up ready for the start of term. I'm just impressed with how colleagues are responding. And it's, as you've got questions for us today, the reality is we will have answers to some questions, but not necessarily to all questions, because as you saw with the A-level results this morning, I think people are making it up as they go along, which is particularly challenging for us, because we've got to respond to all these new bits of guidance that come from government. But I'm confident that we are really ahead of the game in relation to other universities and the preparations that we've made. And of course, Chris, whose main job is looking after international matters, has spent all of his time now taking on a new coordinating role with Paul and Bernie to try and make sure that we've covered every angle that we can possibly think about in terms of bringing students back on campus.
Thank you, Graham. And Chris?
Yeah, hi. I'm PVC Global Engagement and Education Partnerships. My role, as Graham says, is looking at global engagement and our links abroad, and also our international students coming to Portsmouth. For the last 4 months now, I have moved over to become chair of the COVID-19 Planning Delivery Group, of which you are also a member, Hayley. And as you're aware, we have huge work streams and work strands looking at all aspects of the student engagement and staff engagement with the university, with the hope that we will return to some normality, not full normality, but some normality when we start the academic year. Because we understand what students is asking for, which is that they still want some element of face-to-face. They don't want to study online. And so we are working to ensure that we can enable that in a COVID-safe environment. But to do that, my plea to all students is that help us to keep the campus open. It is not just down to any of us here. It is down to the whole community to do what's right and what is needed to keep everyone safe, so that we can keep the campus open. Because if we are to have infections, and we will have to have lockdowns as we've seen in the north, and that's something we are very, very keen to avoid. But that only comes from collaboration and cooperation of everyone involved, every single person involved.
Oh, thank you both. So some of the questions that were asked from students, we asked on Instagram and various other platforms. So some of the questions we've got are related to academic year dates, quality of teaching, and COVID safety measures, as well as international student concerns as well. So on the topic of academic year structure, one of the questions was, why has a Christmas break been cut into 2 weeks? And with this in mind, considering movement is staggered for September and October for safety measures, how do you expect every single student to return safely in the first week of January?
Yeah, we've got to make compromise decisions when thinking about the academic year, and we debated at UEB what the best option would be, and we certainly feel that delaying the start of term to the 5th of October was absolutely the right thing to do. But when doing that, at the same time, we want to make sure at the other end of the year, when students graduate, that they graduate at the same time as they would normally graduate. In other words, we don't want that decision to delay the start of term to then meaning delaying everything throughout the whole year, which then has an impact for the following academic year as well. So it's a complex bit of decision making. We also responded to the fact that students didn't want us to do the obvious thing, which is take out study weeks. and revision weeks, because we felt that there had been a very good and active campaign by students to get them put in the first place, because they really matter to students. So for us to then, with the stroke of a pen, just take them out of the equation, that would not be appropriate. That then meant that we had to make other compromises in terms of the length of the breaks that students have at different times of the years. Now, look, I'm not going to say that it's easy in terms of student over that Christmas period and the way the term runs, but we honestly believe that it is the best compromise to get the best outcomes and best support for students. But of course, it's never going to make everyone happy. That's just something we have to accept. I don't know whether you want to add anything, Chris.
Yeah, I think the delayed start has given us the opportunity, on hindsight now, to help new students who are joining us have that little bit more time to settle matters. If you look at all the things that's going on around clearing confirmation and the A-level results, it gives students that little bit more time to sort their results out before they join us. But also that the reality is that in a COVID-safe environment, the way that students will move into the halls is going to be very different from how we did it in the past. We're going to have to stretch arrival weekend to arrival fortnight, or maybe 3 weeks, because of the volume involved, and you can't have everybody moving in at the same time, as you see in the shops, as you see in all the different places. So with the benefit of hindsight, we have actually felt that this has enabled our students to come and join us in a COVID-safe environment. And yes, there is a reduction of 1 week in, I think it's the Easter holiday, the reduction rather than the Christmas holiday. But that the other reduction is a reduction of 1 week of that sort of marking period. So it's a balance between staff and students having to do that little bit more. But as I said in the beginning, it's all of us working together to keep everyone safe, in a way that enables us to deliver the next academic year in a way that continues to enhance the student experience. You know that we put that as our top priority in all that we do.
And we've been working really hard with our accommodation providers as well, because changing the start of term has implications in terms of the bespoke student accommodation and how that operates. And I just got news this week that our discussions with Unite have had a positive outcome, and so the 2 weeks when students will be arriving early will be effectively 2 free weeks. So the students won't be charged for that, because of course it's for our convenience, so that we can get everybody staggered into halls in a sensible way. But that was been some really fraught and difficult discussions, but I'm pleased to say that they have resulted in a movement from the housing providers, which is very good news. For our halls of residence, it was always going to be that we would give the 2 weeks free, but for the private providers that involved a lot of negotiations, but they've come to the table, which is good news.
Brilliant. Thank you both. So our second question is, students are needing to plan for the new academic year, getting part-time jobs, etc. When can students expect their timetables, and are these likely to be delayed?
Can I start with that, Graham? We normally produce the timetables about 2-3 weeks before the start of the term. This year, the timetable is going to be extremely complex because unlike previous years, we are going to have staggered starts. So it's not going to be everything starts on the hour. Some will start on the half an hour, others will start on the hour, so as to manage the flow and the movement of students around the campus. So there is that added level complexity, but we are still envisaging that we will be able to deliver timetable within the same period of time, about 3 to 4 weeks before the start of the academic year. We are now working very hard to ensure that we have a timetable that works for everyone. And as part of it, as you know, Hayley, we have taken a rental of the Guildhall rooms for the next 3 months until the end of the calendar year, to enable us to have additional space to deliver the kind of blended and connected learning that we need.
Yeah, and I think that the timetable in any case, in terms of student attendance pattern, will of course be much lighter than in previous years. because quite a lot of material will be done online. My biggest concern for students, in fact, is the availability of part-time work. And of course, it really does depend a lot on what happens in terms of the economy, and particularly the, sort of bars, pubs, restaurants, because that's where a lot of students work. And I really am not certain. But it also re-emphasises what Chris said. Once those venues start to open up and are being used and students get jobs in them, it becomes even more important that as a community we take care, because the last thing that we want in Portsmouth is what's happened in Leicester. We really must, all of us, work together to avoid that happening.
Thank you. So I'm just going to move on to some of the questions around COVID safety measures for the next academic year. So the first question is, why are masks only optional and not mandatory, especially since some seminars are going to be face-to-face and usually you work quite closely with peers in these seminars?
I mean, we will be strongly encouraging students to wear, and staff to wear, masks anytime that they are in a building. We are working through the issues around how that might be policed or affected, but there are some real horror stories where in a situation where you say it is mandatory, that people who for medical reasons cannot wear a mask end up creating arguments, fights, and so on. So we really have to approach this very sensitively, because there are some people where a mask will not work for them. So we have to take a very balanced and sensible view. However, if there is no medical reason, then the expectation is that people will wear masks. But I hope that the community will just be sensible. I hope that the community of young people will realise that this is about not just protecting themselves, but their fellow students and their staff who are, looking after them and caring for them. And I think if we take that view in the way that we approach things and take a softly view. Now, if a student continually refuses to wear a mask and that is causing upset and anguish, then of course we will look at what we need to do and how we need to act. But our hope is it will never come to that. The students will be sensible and will follow the advice and the guidance that is clearly given. And of course, the advice and guidance from government is not, in fact, mandatory. And that's the problem that we scratch our head with. So it's not as if it's a police offence. It's not as if it is something that we can take that kind of action on. Any action that we take will be internal action. But Chris, you're closer to the ground than where we've got to in those discussions.
I think the key to underline this is that we are following government advice very closely. So, for example, where it changes, we have changed our advice. Library is one example where on the 8th of August, the advice changed. And so it is now required as a mandatory requirement that they wear masks in the library. In other places where 2 meters is possible, then there is an expectation that they do so within buildings. And in other places where it's less than 2 meters, where it's 1 meter plus, then we would require the wearing of masks. So teaching rooms and some of the labs and all that will be where places where masks will be required. So we are looking at all that messaging. It is a particularly sensitive issue at this point in time in this country, because you have both camps, the pro and the anti-masking camp. And it's one that is difficult. But Graham is right. We also have to recognize that there is a community or group that may not be able to wear masks because of particular reasons. And part of the work streams are looking at how we give them the choice of being able to identify themselves or not, as the case may be, and how we approach those situations in a sympathetic and emphatic way so as not to create anguish and anxiety.
And of course, we will have face shields available for specific circumstances, and that may be a circumstance where if someone cannot wear a mask, then they might be encouraged to wear a face shield. But we again, I have to say, Hayley, it's one of those things that the guidance is changing on a daily basis. The thing we've got to do is be very calm and measured, but ultimately with the safety of our staff and students at the forefront of any decision that we make. And that's why most people would agree now that the most important thing is basic sensible hygiene, which is constantly sanitizing your hands, constantly making sure that you're wiping down keyboards and so on. And all the facilities will be there for that to happen, with sanitizing stations all over the university. But of course, they are utterly useless if students and staff don't use them. And so my plea is, participate in this as part of a community and make sure that you're caring for your own personal hygiene, and in doing so, you're caring for others. And that's the key message, I think.
Oh, thank you. Similar to that, next question is, if I have some face-to-face teaching, but I'm too anxious to come in, will this have an impact on my attendance?
Shall I start, Graham, and you might want to add on this? Essentially, no. If you're not able to join us for whatever reason, particularly your circumstances do not allow you to, we have always said that students can follow the classes online. Now, there is a slight caveat to that, that in some courses, some modules, that hands-on experience does make a particular difference. So you might be able to watch some simulation, but actually getting your hands dirty and trying out the circuit board, for example, is quite important. So we would like to encourage our students to join us when they can, but we recognize that there will be circumstances where they can't. So they can follow the classes online, virtually, to different ways. All the colleagues are working hard to enable that in all the different ways. As you know, we have so many different courses that are taught in very different ways. So each course and each module will have some differences in how that is delivered to support our students studying virtually. But colleagues are working hard, particularly over the summer, and many have sacrificed their personal annual leave to work to support our students to be able to deliver this in a virtual way. But we will try and make sure that they get as similar as possible an experience. But we would like them to join us as much as they can and when they can. And some students may not wish to. We will try and explore it with them and see what we can do to support them in an appropriate way.
But I think Hayley, the only thing I would add to that is that everyone is nervous, actually. I'm obsessively nervous, and I've got to try and control my tendency to shout at people that are coming too close to me in the street and things like that. And I get very annoyed when I see a bunch of people not observing any social distancing, as you'll see around. And part of the challenge of us moving out of lockdown is easing people into the environment that they feel safe in, and trying to encourage them to participate more. So I understand that many students are going to feel very, very nervous. The measures we have put in place are probably more secure. Well, actually, they are more secure than many of the measures that have been in place in hospitals during the whole of the crisis, to be honest. And so I think the university environment is a good environment for students to start to take that step out into the normal world, because we will all have to do that at some point anyway. And I think by doing that and overcoming that sense of fear and nervousness is quite important. And as Chris says, we're making a lot of effort to try and have some face-to-face tutorial and other elements. And we're doing that because students have said that they want it, but we're also doing it because we know it's valuable in terms of their educational experience. And while, yes, we can accommodate, mainly if there are medical or other reasons, students studying fully online, as it were, I really would encourage students to try and take that brave step, because I think they will find the environment is well laid out. It is good social distancing. It is safe, with people being sensible. And I think they will find the experience, yes, not as good as it was before COVID, but I think they'll find the experience valuable, because I think there's nothing better than having some element of face-to-face discussions, tutorials, and of course, as Chris said, hands-on experience for those programs where there is a practical element that is really important, that practical experience is gained by students. So we've been working hard to make it happen. And it would be a real shame if students decided at the end of the day, well, we just don't fancy it and we won't bother, because actually it's important for their development, their educational development. And that's why we're making the effort in the first place.
Thank you both. Next question. What will happen if I get coronavirus symptoms when I'm supposed to move to Portsmouth? What should I do?
Yeah, I mean, Chris can answer this. I mean, there's a number of things here. There are students who maybe are preparing to come here and have got symptoms. They need to, first of all, they need to do what the government says, which is quarantine for 14 days. But they should obviously keep closely in touch with us about what their situation is. Now, it may be they have the symptoms before they arrive, in which case, well, we'll sort out delaying their arrival appropriately. It may be they arrive, that those symptoms emerge soon after they arrive. Now, in that regard, we are in a very fortunate place in that we have now, we are one of the only universities who has partnered with the Department of Health and Social Care. To set up a test centre on the university premises on the Eldon car park. And that's all already set up and ready to go, which means that students and staff will have a priority route if they feel any symptoms to just go immediately, book it online and just walk, get tested and then put their mind at ease or otherwise. And I think testing is a really important part of this. And we've made a huge amount of effort to try and sort out easy testing for staff and students. Because, of course, if someone feels that they have symptoms, they may not be coronavirus symptoms. So what a shame it is if they're worrying about that for 2 weeks and concerned, whereas now we can move them immediately into the point of being tested. Then we'll know the result. We'll be able to trace all those that have been in touch with that person, get them tested, and then be able to hopefully move the system on quite efficiently. And if there is an outbreak anywhere or someone has it, then we will know very quickly and we'll be able to act very quickly, which I believe is the key to keeping the campus safe. I don't know whether you want to add anything, Chris.
No, I think that's very comprehensive. I would just want to add is that there are ways for us to help discover the symptoms. So in key buildings in the university, we are anticipating having temperature sensors. There are already some in operation in the dental academy as well as the library and in the 3 buildings that we've opened for our clearing operations to monitor people coming in so that we can detect high temperatures before they come in. And if they are, then our protocol is that they go self-isolate, contact NHS, do the test as appropriate so as to prevent spread. Because the symptoms are important, because if you have a fever, you are still infectious for a number of days thereafter. You don't want to spread to your own family and to others around you. So that's why the self-isolation and the testing is quite important as part of our overall package of keeping everyone safe on campus.
But Hayley, I would say it's also a developing picture, because as well as testing people who have symptoms, we are also looking at the possibility of having available tests for people who don't have symptoms to try and get an overall idea of what's happening as students return to university. And we're in discussions with the Portsmouth Hospitals University Trust now to see whether we can effect that. And hopefully in the next week, we will have a contract signed with them that will allow us to do more random testing, or testing for individuals who just want to know, because of course some people might have it and have no symptoms. That's the other, issue that exists. And the other thing that we're looking at carefully is the issue of seasonal flu vaccination. And, again, I would really encourage students, before they come to university, to inquire about getting a flu vaccine, because that then eliminates one confounding set of circumstances, like you've got ordinary flu, that could really, cause issues. So it would be good if most of us had, if not all of us, had a flu vaccination. We're looking at the possibilities of what we might be able to do on campus here to support all our students and staff having such a vaccination.
Well, thank you both. That sounds really safe and reassuring as well. So thank you for that. So the next set of questions are around the quality of teaching. So the first question on that, how will access to open learning areas and useful resources such as computers work during peak periods? So exam season and other busy times of the year.
I mean, look, Hayley, it's going to be different in terms of open areas, and we're looking at how we can create as many open spaces for students to work as possible. And part of the arrangement with the Guildhall is to create other spaces that we can use, that the students can use. And I'm conscious of the fact that for some students it is also about laptop availability and the like. And we are extending and further developing our laptop loan scheme, so that people have that mobility and a laptop to take with them with their materials available. And we're looking at what we can do in terms of cloud simulation of higher spec machines and running the higher spec software. So there's a lot of work ongoing at the moment, and I think that that's an area where I think we can make life easier for students and better for students. Chris?
Yeah, just to add to that, we are exploring the spaces, but I think we recognize that we are making sure that all the open access areas, the PCs, are all have keyboards and mice which students can wipe to keep themselves safe. But there will be a reduced capacity. But that the laptop scheme, both on the short-term laptop scheme that we already have on campus and the longer-term laptop scheme that we will be giving to undergraduate students who need it, will ensure that they can follow and have access to our online learning materials from wherever they are, whether that be on home, whether that be from their halls of residence, or whether that be on campus, so that the reduction in physical space in some of the PC open access areas is mitigated in that way. As much as we can, but we will support students. And part of the scheme of loans is not just about laptop, it's about things that enables them to work from home. So it could be a dongle where they've got weak Wi-Fi signal, a mice if they have a knee or keyboards, as the case may be. So whatever we can do to support the students' learning will be there. But I think as you recognize externally in all the shops and places, it will be restricted. I don't think we will ever, at this point in time, without the vaccine, go back to pre-COVID in the kind of crowded and big numbers in one place for a while.
And the other issue that I know is under discussion, I'm not quite sure where it's got to yet, but the notion of having a booking system for the library as well, where rather than people sort of turning up and discovering that there's a big queue outside or whatever, having a sort of live booking system that people can log on to, which means that if they're turning up at 11 o'clock, they'll know there's a space for them at 11 o'clock kind of idea. It will mean students will have to be less spontaneous and plan their interactions a little bit more. But then that's what's happening in restaurants and pubs everywhere, that booking systems are in place. So we certainly will be looking. I don't know, Chris, how far that has got yet.
We are working on it for the library, but I think PCs is possible because we already have a system for that. So there'll be modifications in the system to enable that. And in the library, because of the work of the turnstiles, we know how many can be in the library at one time. So the librarian, Ken Dick, is working very closely to make sure that there is some form of booking system in place for the start of academic year.
And at the moment, of course, you can look online and see where there are spaces on our different open learning areas. And I think it's making sure that's operating properly and fully extended, I think, to help students plan their day and where they will go to work and to relax.
Thank you. So the next question is around contact hours. Obviously, there's a new blended learning approach. So the question was, do contact hours mean physical face-to-face meetings or lectures, or just online?
I mean, contact hours will include online, of course, because we will be using online as a major means of replacing the large lecture interactions that were commonplace but can happen now. So yes, of course, they will be regarded as contact hours, but the intention is to try and make those interactions interactive and involved, and not just sort of sitting in your room loading up a lecture that's been done earlier, but rather interactive type sessions. So that's the intent, is to as much as possible make it really interesting learning. And some of my colleagues have got some great ideas that they're working on, and I think it will be really interesting. And it'll be really interesting, I think, as we go through this period of time, to learn, to get feedback, Hayley, from students about what is working well, what isn't working well, because we are all charting new territory here, and it's really important that we have a good feedback look and we learn from what's working and what isn't working. But we have committed, as I say, to around about 6 hours of face-to-face type, in person, as it were, contact per programme of study. It won't be exactly that for every programme of study. Some it may be more, where there are a lot of laboratories and other type sessions that are taking place. But that is a commitment to try and keep some element of face-to-face. And as I said earlier, Hayley, really important that we encourage students to take advantage of that, because we're making a huge effort. It would be easy in a way just to say everything's online, forget all that. But I don't think that's the right approach at all. I think it's important to try and have some element of real face-to-face contact, which will be, as I say, up to 6 hours per programme of study.
Yeah, and that will be a variety of ways. Some will be seminars and tutorials, but some, like, say, civil engineering, and I was just talking to colleagues from that faculty yesterday, that they will have field trips and field work as part of that the course, and that will increase some of the contact time above that 6 hours, because, I mean, externally in field work, that's easy to do in a COVID-safe environment because you're not in a confined space, and they will continue to do that kind of activity. So I think every course will be slightly different as to what that face-to-face means, but as I said, we are committed to delivering a certain amount for each course. It will not be equal throughout the modules, because some modules will lend itself to less, others will lend itself to more, depending on the environment.
But the important thing, Hayley, is that all students get a full and complete equivalent education, despite the circumstances that we are facing, and that's what we are determined to do. And in a sense, counting hours isn't the answer. They may end up with slightly more hours online, actually, when it all comes down at the end of the day. And so it's about trying to make sure that the totality of the learning experience is equivalent, and the students then go through the year and pick up the knowledge that they need and the experience that they need to then go on and be successful.
Thank you. Yeah, and on feedback as well, the past few months at Students' Union, we've been making sure that we get as much student feedback as possible from surveys and consultations with students, just to ensure that some of the feedback is being fed into the COVID work streams, and we'll continue to do that for the next few months anyway. And if there's any changes that needs to happen, they'll all be based on student consultation and feedback anyway.
So that's helpful.
Yeah.
Hayley, thank you. I mean, on behalf of the university, as chair of the planning group, we do value that. That has given us very important feedback to make sure that in all that we are planning, the students' interest is at the forefront, and that has helped provide that feedback.
And putting a positive slant in all of this, it's really, really hard for everyone, for all of us as individuals, for our families and so on. But in a way, it's exciting because, let's see what we can do together as a community to make this really work. And I think we'll only do that if we listen to each other and take feedback from each other, and of course compromise, but as I said earlier, most importantly, recognise that for some people it's going to be hard getting back out into the real world again, and we need to be really respectful of each other and, you know, conform to the measures that have been put in place for you know, student safety and staff safety.
Yeah, thank you. So the next question is about no detriment practices. So we see several questions from students around no detriment and dissatisfaction. So the question was, what practices are you putting in place for the upcoming year in regards to no detriment practices?
Chris, you can answer that one. It was such a controversial issue. This whole no detriment policy issue. Look, I think we ended up in a good place this year in terms of the way that we approached things. We will continue this year to learn from the experience of last year, or the end of last year, and we will certainly roll over where appropriate the right practices to make sure that students' interests are met. Look, we as a university, for us, it's all about our students being successful. I mean, there's no big plot otherwise. We want our students to be successful. But equally well, we do want the efforts and hard work of individual students to be appropriately recognised, and we've seen how not to do it with the A-level results today, and we want to make sure, I mean, that we navigate this next period appropriately, and that we are fair to students using good assessment practices that work. We learned a lot, I think, from lockdown about what we can do, and I think there are some elements of that frankly were quite good, and we should maybe build in more permanently to the way that we operate the university. When one of the challenges that we are always faced with, of course, is the Office for Students' view on academic standards and the Quality Assurance Agency, who are breathing down our necks at the moment. And you're very concerned now about you know, algorithms for honours classifications and so on. In fact, the latest edict suggests that we should only really have one, whereas we have 3 algorithms that we use, and the students get benefit of the best, which I think worked really well during the lockdown. But that's one of the practices that they're calling into question, and we will have to just navigate that carefully over the next 12 months or so. But we'll be you know, learning from what we've done, sticking to some of the practices. But one of the things that we have learned, Hayley, I think, is let's talk more with the Students' Union. Let's be more involved, because if anything went wrong during that period, it was probably the speed with which things were changing, and as a result, the lack of communication, or effective communication of the things that we were actually doing to support students. And I think there is a lesson there for us over this next period of time. So I'm looking forward to that kind of close dialogue as we you know, move through the start of term and into the end of the first teaching block.
I think, just to add to what Graham says, last year and this year are very different. Last year we had to go to the lockdown. Things had to change very suddenly, and even assessments had to be changed quite quickly. This year, and therefore the no detriment policy was probably right in that context, because it was unexpected, it happened, and therefore there was some effect on how the students were preparing for the end of the year assessments. You know, changing from exams to coursework in a period of weeks requires a different mindset and work. So I think the practices was right. In this coming academic year, we also need to recognize that colleagues are planning for the whole year in a particularly different way. They're planning and considering how we do the assessment and achieving the learning outcomes, so that if a student engages appropriately throughout the academic year, there shouldn't be any real need to rely on no detriment practice, because that learning has been planned. So whether it's done virtually or done on campus, it has been considered as a package of the delivery of the module for the whole academic year. Because the key thing is that we don't want the graduating courses to be judged as, oh, they were that group of students who were given more flexibility because they were suffering from COVID, and calls into question the value of the degree. We don't want that. We want our graduates to be able to demonstrate I've earned this qualification, I've worked hard, it's on my own achievements, not because of any leeway or flexibility. I think it's about the personal achievement and the flexibility. But we will look at the situation over the next academic year. But please be assured that everything the academic community is doing in the faculties is to plan for the next year in a way that we can deliver the learning outcomes in a more planned and coherent way, better than we could towards the end of last year, which caught all of us by surprise. So I think the year is very different. And also the students are now entering into this with their eyes open, understanding what it is that they need to achieve. And actually, the reality is that we will have face-to-face. What we won't have is the big lectures which we're doing online. But I think as a student, you readily admit that sitting in the lectures with 200, listening to somebody talk to a PowerPoint is probably not the best use of your 2 hours. And having it online means that you can look at it, you can reflect on it, you can repeat it for however many times you want. And that helps your understanding in a better way. And the value is in the shorter, smaller course delivery in terms of seminars, tutorial, workshops, where you actually are challenged in your learning, having got the materials from the lectures and your research as well. So I think students also need to engage in a different way with our delivery and to make use of the best parts of it in the appropriate way.
It's also probably worth saying there are no detriment practices where, in effect, an extension of what we do anyway, but we, made it very explicit what we were doing because of the particular set of circumstances. And I think that there are, as I say, lessons to be learned, and certainly our experience on assessment, ways of assessing and so on. I think there are some things that work quite well, and you will see replicated in this next year. And I think what I would like us to do as a community is to try and reshape what a campus-based learning experience looks like, to try and get the optimum balance between online and digitally and technology-supported learning and what traditionally has happened at universities. Because as Chris says, I think that the value of sitting in a lecture with 300 people or 200 people and someone rabbiting on with maybe the same notes or PowerPoint that they used a previous year or previous 10 years isn't necessarily the best way to learn. And we know from pedagogical studies that what you take in, what you actually learn in that situation is very, very limited. And so maybe this is an opportunity for us to try out new things and new technologies. And, I think out of this, there will be some things that at the end of it will say, let's make them a permanent feature of education at the university. I hope that's the case.
Yeah, I think with no detriment practices, there was obviously a lot of discussion, but I think at the end of it, we came to a really good agreement, and a lot of students are really, they really valued that they've been listened to and sort of acted on, the university acted on what the students thought would be best. And I think a lot of students have actually benefited from the no detriment practice of the past few months. And obviously going into the next year, we're still not back to normal. So I think some no detriment practices would need to be carried over, some elements of it to be able to support students the best they can. It's like that's happening.
Yeah, I think the one thing that was important about what we did was the ability to recognise the personal and particular circumstances of individuals. And I think, again, this is where the government's blanket approach to A-levels has turned out to be a disaster, both in Scotland and now in England, because it's so corporate in general and not individualized, that it takes no account of what the circumstances are of individuals. Now, our procedures at the universities do that in any case, and we just need to make sure that the good elements of what worked well are carried forward, and that applies to all aspects of this strange situation that we find ourselves in. There will be good elements to this. We just need to make sure we capture them and that we don't lose them, and that when it's all over, we just don't go back to the good old ways, which may not always be the best.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. So the next set of questions are from international students and queries around that. So first question, with international students still expected to pay the full tuition fees, what concessions or scholarships are available for international students within the university, and how will you ensure the quality of teaching is still the same?
Okay. I'll answer that, Graham, if that's okay, as a start, and then you can add in. With international students, we already have a range of scholarships. We have the Vice Chancellor scholarships, we have country scholarships, which are still being given to students from those countries. And we have the merit scholarships as well. What we are saying is that our blended and connected learning, even if they can't join us, they start online. The expectation is still that they join us. We are still delivering the face-to-face in the same way on campus, and they can follow virtually. But there is an expectation that they will join us. So we believe that we deliver the education in a value for money way, and to deliver on the learning outcomes for each of individual students. So we have, as I said, provided the scholarships where appropriate. So we can't discount the fees for one group of students and not do it for others, but that because we are delivering it on a face-to-face basis, we are not doing everything online. So it's not something that we would be in a position to consider. As you know, everyone will be struggling this year, as will all the universities in the sector. They will see potentially a reduction of income across the piece because of potentially fewer international students in the sector. So we are trying to manage as best we can. The students have a choice. They can start with us now online and join us in the middle if they wish to, or at very latest by the start of TB2. The students then have an option, especially postgraduate students, when they graduate in the summer, to stay on and work for 2 years as well under the new graduate scheme introduced by the government recently. So there are options available, or they can delay their start to January if they wish to, for some of the courses that we run in January. So I think the experience of being in the UK and studying in the university here in a multicultural environment is still valuable for international students. And it's not just about getting that piece of paper. If you want a qualification that you want to do totally online, there are many courses across the world that have online courses. But what distinguishes as University of Portsmouth is the experience that we give to students as part of the hallmarks of a Portsmouth graduate. And that is things that you don't just learn from being in class and taking exams. It's about the networking, it's about the skills, it's about the employability skills, the sort of personal development skills that we built in. And also, as I said, living in a different environment helps you to grow up very quickly and develop a different approach, a global mindset in a way that you won't get if you're learning virtually at home.
So to summarize that answer, the answer is no, that the scholarships will be there as they have been, and we want to encourage international students to join us on campus. And bear in mind, some international students are joining undergraduate programs, and for goodness sake, this is a transitionary period that we are in, and it will have to be over at some point, back to some kind of new normal. And so it will be a great shame for people to miss out because of a worry about maybe a month or 2 months of teaching, which might be slightly different or held in a different way. But I understand for some people there are physical reasons internationally why they can't get here, because of flights and other situations. And in those circumstances, what we want to do is to try and support our international students in the best way we can, and that is by providing a personalised, first-class educational experience that reflects the values of the University of Portsmouth, the history of the University of Portsmouth, and the quality that we know we provide to our students. And to provide that, including online, is just as expensive. In fact, if you look at the investment that we're having to put in to try and create those exciting online materials, then it is very significant. And so, yes, you can go onto an online program that may be cheaper than we are charging, but the experience will be cheaper and will reflect the price that is paid. And so we believe that we will be able to provide our international students with an excellent experience. If they choose to be online for a period of time, I am certain that they will be over here soon, and operating fully with the whole of the experience that the university has to offer. And the same question goes to our home students who might be joining. They might be joining in their first year, but they've got 3 years of study with us, and be sure that things will ease over time, and that we will be back to this new normal, which will be the full campus experience, but better, because we'll have learned from the things that worked when we went through the lockdown, and hopefully have embedded some of the good practices in our learning and teaching.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question for international student. What actions are you taking to support international students in regards to time zone differences or access to materials if there are restrictions to access in certain countries?
That is something that the course teams are taking into account, particularly in terms of how the material is delivered. Some will be delivered asynchronous and some will deliver synchronous. So that will reflect on the time zone. So if it's recorded, they can access it at the time when it's convenient. But that is depending on individual courses. But this is a matter that the course teams are aware of. Some courses have very few international students, so adjustments will be made in the way that fits that course. But where there are big groups of international students, please be assured that the course teams have factored this into the way that they deliver the teaching virtually, so that all students can benefit from it.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. So this one's about uni finances. So where tuition fees are remaining the same during a period of blended learning, what's the university doing to ensure value for money? I think you've touched on that previously, haven't you? I've got a question, but unless you want to answer?
No, I mean, the bigger issue with student finances is the reality that most universities will be finding the financial environment very difficult, because we have a group of staff geared up to educate a certain number of students in person. We probably won't have the same number of students next year, because there will be undoubtedly less international students, and that will mean a reduced income. So under those circumstances, some universities will have to very quickly move to a point of reducing costs. Now, we're in the fortunate position that we have a reasonable reserve in the bank, so we can suffer a deficit for a period of time, without having to take, unplanned, drastic, unthought through actions. And so I think, if anything, students will be getting a very good experience at the University of Portsmouth, because we will be able to sort of see through this particular financial difficulty that all universities will be facing, because we've been prudent and sensible in our finances in the past. In other words, we have cash in the bank that we will have to spend to deal with the deficit that we are facing. But that's why we've put in so many measures, because we've had the financial capability of doing the things we've done across campus, and investing in new technologies for the delivery and provision of really high quality online learning. So I think we're in a very strong and good position, but that's not to say it's easy. It's going to be a really tough year for the executive team to navigate our finances over the next year. But our determination is that the provision to students will be as good, but different, of course, because it has to be, than any other year. And that is our commitment, because we're building a university for the long term. We're building a university that we want our graduates to be saying to their children and their grandchildren, you should go to that university as well, because look what it did for me. This university is here forever. And will be strong forever, and that's where our decision making is about the long term, security and success of the university, and that's only possible if we give students the very best experience we can under those circumstances.
Well, thank you. I think that's what we have time for, but thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to answer some of these questions. I know a lot of this has been discussed in the work streams that myself and the other officers are involved in. I think it's really good for students to hear what exactly is going on, even students who are not part of Portsmouth yet. I think it's really good for them to understand what next year will look like and be reassured that, the university are doing what they can, but also realising that there's lots to do and students can be involved in shaping that and what next year will look like for them. So we have a few more questions, but we can send those to you and we can answer them in an article.
Yeah, and if there's any need, Hayley, in the future for a more interactive session with a group of students, then I'm very happy to do that, actually, because I think it's really important for us to keep our communication lines going, because hopefully it will give students an insight on the thinking of the team and what we're trying to do for them to make it the best that it can be. But it also helps us, because we don't know always what it feels like for a student under those circumstances, and I think for us to hear that, it helps us. It helps shape the things that we do, because at the end of the day we want it to be the best that it can be, but inevitably it's not going to be the same as it was in previous years, but I think it could in some aspects be better for students in terms of flexibility of the education that we provide for our students.
Yeah, and I think more regular Q&As and sessions would be really welcomed by students, and I think communication will be key for the next upcoming year, so that would be really helpful. Thank you.
And I'm sure you're feeling it as a students' union. You will not first time get everything right. The most important thing is that we learn from it, and as a sort of team, not being critical of each other, but we are open to hearing when things aren't quite right, and then we're open to trying to make them right or make them better for our community.
I think I also want to add to what Graham has said, that I think in the next 12 months, the agility and flexibility and understanding of the community will be key, because we are going to have to change how we do things at very short notice, where government advice changes, and that it may sometimes need quick action and response from colleagues and students as well. It may not all be to the liking of the students, but if government has said that we needed to do something, our hands are tied. So I think next year is trying to get back to a new normal, but there may be bumps along the way, and we just need to be flexible and keep talking. But I think our priority is keeping everyone safe and keeping the campus open.
And we just hope that sometime soon, within this next period, that we'll all have the opportunity of anti-COVID vaccination, and then we can sigh a sigh of relief. Of course, until the next infection goes round the world, but
I hope not, honestly.
That would be good. But I do really feel it's tough for your generation. I think it's tough for students. I feel sad. I've got young children, well, not young children, they're young adults, and it's a really difficult environment and a difficult time. And what we don't want to do is to dwell on the negative, because I don't think that helps any of us. The circumstances are as they are, and it is our job to make it the best possible, and we do that by all supporting each other, I think.
Oh, well, thank you very much for your time today. I'm sure I'll speak to you both soon in a work stream in the next few weeks.
Indeed.
Thank you, Hayley.
Take care, Hayley.
Thank you, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.